Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, Tenta Outdoors. My name's Alan. I was fortunate enough to be the last person standing on this season of Alone. This video, I want to talk about the things I'd do differently if I could go back and do it all again, whether it be in my preparation or actually during my time out there during my experience. Stick around, we're going to talk about that right now. So the first things I want to talk about deal with my preparation for the experience. The first thing I do differently is I would have exchanged a bunch of my single hooks for a bunch of treble hooks. I should have brought a few treble hooks with me. And why didn't I talk about this in orientation camp? And he decided to take some, but I was too worried about giving up 3 hooks for each treble hook. So that was kind of what made me frightened to sacrifice 3 single hooks for 1 treble hook. But in retrospect, with all the strikes that I had that didn't result in a hookup, with all the fish that were on my line for just a split second and then they got off, I think I would have brought 4 or 5 treble hooks, because I wouldn't have known this until I went out there, but my spot was fairly deep where I fished and I didn't hardly lose any hooks. I lost 2 hooks on that big pike, and I lost another 2 hooks on a snag. Other than that, I came home with most of my hooks. So in retrospect, a few treble hooks probably would have ended up with a few more fish. Number 2, I would have brought a different pair of warm gloves. The warm mitts that I brought, I mean, they were rated for very cold, but I'd never practiced taking them on and off repeatedly with kind of sweaty, sticky hands. So the gloves that I brought with me, every time I took them off, they'd come inside out and the liner would get all messed up, and I'd have to spend quite a bit of time getting the liner back in order, back in the glove, so my fingers would fit in properly. But when you're out there filming all the time or fishing, or you're using your hands a lot, and my warm mitts I could not take on and off easily to change batteries, turn the camera on and off, tie a fishing knot. What I should have done was brought large, like oven mitt style gloves that were kind of loose fitting and like maybe high on the forearm, ones I could just slip in and slip out of really easily. That would have made my experience out there a little bit more comfortable. So I ended up hardly using the warm mitts that I brought. You'll see me in most of the scenes, even when it was cold near the end of the game, I was just wearing my leather work gloves because they were really easy to get on and off. So that was my second thing I'd do a little bit differently. The third change I'd make for my preparations is in the area of sleeping bags. So it all worked out and I was able to, stay warm enough to stay in the game, but I bought a -40 sleeping bag. I'm not sure how the ratings work for how, cold they're rated for, but it must have something to do with having a good foam pad on the bottom. But I would have bought a -60 sleeping bag because I did get pretty cold in the evenings, and the only thing that got me through was filling my sleeping bags full of hot rocks. So I think I would have got a -60 sleeping bag, and that could have maybe made me feel a bit more comfortable. Another thing about the sleeping bag that I probably would have changed, I wouldn't have got such a tight fitting one. I bought a mummy sleeping bag. Obviously keeps you warmer, but I think I would have liked more of a square sleeping bag. I'm a pretty big person, so I got a nice long one. I ordered a long one, but I couldn't get a wide one. And some nights, when it's all zipped up and I hood up, I felt very claustrophobic, like I couldn't move. And that prevented me from having some good sleep. So maybe a -60, more square sleeping bag, I would have been more comfortable and a little bit warmer. Another thing I would have done differently is practice my archery shots high up in trees. I did a lot of practicing with my longbow and had my gaps down really well for on the ground or just off the ground. But I'd say almost all my shots on grouse, except maybe for one, were at extreme angles high up in trees. And unless you practice that, you're not quite as effective. So I ended up killing 5 grouse when I was out there, but I missed at least that many or more due to not practicing shots high up in trees. So in retrospect, I would have had targets in trees, like a couple of big bag targets around my house up in trees with a ladder to retrieve your arrows, obviously, and it would have done a lot more practicing shooting at extreme angles high up in trees. So the things I just discussed were more my preparation. But what would I have done differently when I was out there? There's a few things I would have changed a bit. I think I may have made my teepee a bit too large. I'm very happy with the teepee structure. I mean, I didn't use a lot of calories building it, and it kept me fairly warm and completely dry. But I think I made it a bit too big because the distance across the base, I don't know if you watched it in the final episode, but it was really large. It was really large, and I didn't really need all that room. So I would have made it a bit smaller. It would have been a bit easier to heat up. And when the fire was going in there, it heated up quite nicely, and I stayed nice and warm. But the only issue with a teepee and having your fire in the middle is that when you can't have a smoldering, slow fire. When the fire's going and it's fairly robust and warm and it's crackling, all the smoke just travels right up the top. There's no smoke whatsoever in my teepee. But if you want to have a low smoldering fire, it doesn't produce enough draft and heat to carry that smoke up the top. So I always had to, let the fire burn out before I went to bed. I'd heat up my rocks and whatnot, and it would stay warm in there for a time. But because I had an open top, I found that it cooled down quite quickly. So in retrospect, I would have liked to develop some sort of flap or some sort of plug, maybe propped up with a stick. And when I went to bed and the fire was out, I could knock that stick down and it would kind of plug the top to keep that cold air from coming down. So I think that's a change I would have made. The next thing I would have done differently has to do with inside my shelter. I made my bed very low. It was off the ground, maybe only that much. So when I was sitting on the edge of my bed in front of my fire, it was kind of hard on my back for one thing. It would have been easier if I was kind of propped up a bit more. And sitting so low to the fire like that, a lot of the heat was here. So if I was up a little bit higher, I would have been more exposed to the heat coming off the fire, and it would have made me feel a bit warmer and a little bit more comfortable. So I would have made my bed maybe 2.5 feet off the ground instead of 8 or 9 inches. The last thing I would have changed would be making a wooden handrail. Not a fishing rod, but a handrail, because you saw me drop it twice. And that could have been pretty bad. So, watching the show, I'm like, why didn't I build a better hand casting reel? I mean, I loved hand casting. It was super fun and it was effective. But it would have been so easy to make. It would have taken no time at all. Made a device with a handle and the wooden spool on top, so I could have that really good grip on it. And I don't think I ever would have dropped it, because the plastic spool I was using, I had to just hang on to the bottom of it with my 4 fingers. And it became an issue when I got cold and my hands were kind of numb and they just didn't feel as coordinated as they usually do. So having a hand reel like that, made out of wood with a big handle, would have prevented me from dropping my spool in the water those couple times. Folks, thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. My name's Alan. This is Tent Outdoors. If you do like these videos, please subscribe to my channel. We'll see you next time.